The world does not need more people who are willing to let each other off the hook. The world needs more people who are willing to believe in each other, loudly, specifically, stubbornly, even when the person being believed in hasn't started to believe in themselves yet. Welcome to the Kindest Extremist podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. I've spoken to tens of thousands of people all over the world about the importance of kindness. And I am obsessed with how we can bring more kindness into our daily lives and restore balance to a deeply unbalanced world. Every episode, I'll give you 3 practical strategies to create a kinder world, and I'll do it in 30 minutes or less. No fluff, just valuable, actionable content that you can implement in your life immediately after listening to help you actively create a kinder world. There's no time to waste. Let's dive in. What's up, my friend? Welcome back to episode 55 of the Kindest Extremist podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. And as a reminder, if you're not already, please make sure to follow me on Substack at sholarichards.substack.com. And if you are enjoying this podcast, the best way to support this work is to leave a rating and a review. Both are deeply, deeply appreciated. Okay, so today I want to start this episode with a question that I'm so excited to ask you. Who is the person in your life who pushed you the hardest? Not the person who's always warm and easy to be around. I mean, the person who refused to let you settle. The coach who made you run the drill again. The teacher who handed back your paper and said, I know that you can do better than this. The mentor who told you the hard truth you needed to hear instead of the comfortable truth that you really wanted. The parent who, no matter how much you persisted, would not let you off the hook. Now, here's the second question. When you think about that person today, what do you feel? I'll bet for most of you, if you're anything like me, the answer is some version of gratitude, maybe even love. Because on the other side of all that difficulty, you can see what they actually saw in you. They saw someone worth pushing. They saw someone who's capable of more than what you're showing. They saw your potential and they cared enough about you to refuse to pretend that it didn't exist. That, my friend, is what I want to talk about today. The radical, countercultural, deeply misunderstood idea that high expectations are an act of kindness. And I would argue one of the greatest acts of kindness, actually. And here's the thing we often reach for in the name of compassion. Lowering the bar, softening the standard, letting people slide to spare their feelings. That is actually the least kind thing that we can do. Now, to be abundantly clear, before you think I've come here to build a case for being harsh, demanding, or critical, let me assure you that is not what this episode's about. There is a world of difference between high expectations rooted in genuine belief and love and perfectionism rooted in fear and control that I outline in painstaking detail in episode 52 of this podcast. We're going to live in that difference today. And I want to be transparent with you about something. This topic hits close to my heart as a father. So as you probably know, I have 2 daughters. And one of the questions that I wrestle with most is this: how do I hold them to high standards without crushing them? How do I believe in them so fiercely that it lifts them up rather than pushes them down? Getting this right matters enormously to me, and I'm still very much learning, to be quite honest. In episode 51, we talked about the lost art of encouragement, how to build people up in a world that tears them down. Think of today's episode as the companion piece to that one, because real encouragement and high expectations are not opposites. They're 2 sides of the same coin. You can't genuinely build someone up while simultaneously telling them through your lowered bar that you don't believe that they're capable of more. To ensure that we land on the right side of this bar, let's get into it. I want to start with something that's going to flip the script of what many of us were taught about kindness. Low expectations are not kind. They are, in fact, one of the most subtle, damaging forms of kindness that exists, precisely because they disguise themselves as kindness and compassion. Here's what I mean. When we lower our expectations for someone, when we decide to stop pushing, stop challenging, and stop holding them accountable to a higher standard, we almost always tell ourselves a story about why we're doing it. We say we're being empathetic. We say we don't want to put too much pressure on them. We say we're meeting them where they are. And sure, some of that can be legitimate, sometimes. But more often than not, low expectations are about our own discomfort, not their well-being. We lower the bar because we don't want the awkward conversation, because we don't want them to be upset with us. Because holding someone to a high standard takes energy and follow through and the willingness to sit in the tension. And that's hard. In last week's episode 54, we talked about people pleasers, one of my favorite topics, and how people pleasing is a fear disguised as generosity. I'd argue that low expectations are often the same thing, but here's the more serious problem. When we lower our expectations for someone, we are sending them an unmistakable message, even if we never say a word out loud. That message is this: I don't believe you're capable of more than this. And that message does real damage. I've been thinking about a leader I worked with a while ago. I'll call her Heather. Heather prided herself on being a compassionate manager. Her team loved her. Her vibe was warm and easy. Heather was the kind of boss who never voiced her displeasure, never pushed anyone too hard, never delivered feedback that made anyone uncomfortable. But here's what actually was happening on Heather's team. Her most talented people were stagnating. A high potential employee, I'll call him Noah, had been in the same role for 3 years without any meaningful stretch assignments or development conversations. Noah had grown comfortable, and predictably, Heather had grown comfortable with him being comfortable. She told himself that she was being kind by not pushing him. But here's what Noah experienced: something very different. He felt like Heather had written him off, like she didn't think he had anything to offer. And unsurprisingly, Noah left that organization within the year, and Heather never understood why. This story is not unusual. It happens all the time in workplaces and families and schools and friendships. We think we're protecting people from pressure, and what we're actually doing is communicating our doubt in them loudly, even in our silence. When we expect less of someone because we've decided, consciously or not, that they can't handle more, we've made a judgment about their limits that is not ours to make. And that judgment, however gently delivered, however well-intentioned, sends a signal that erodes confidence, stifles growth, and ultimately diminishes the person that we thought we were protecting. Think about a time in your own life when someone's belief in you changed what you believed about yourself. One of my favorite examples of this was in my early 30s, working in a job that I wasn't terribly excited about, writing in my spare time with no real confidence that anyone would ever care about what I had to say. A friend of mine read some of my writing and did something that completely blindsided me at the time. He didn't just say, "This is pretty good, Shola." He said, "Yo, Shola, this is the work you're supposed to be doing. I don't know what you're waiting for, man, but whatever it is, I need you to stop waiting." He didn't lower the bar to make me feel better. He raised it. He held a vision of what I was capable of that was bigger and more demanding than anything that I was holding for myself. And it changed the entire trajectory of what I believed was possible for me to pursue. That is the power of high expectations, not as a weapon, not as pressure, but as a form of belief, as a declaration. I see what you're capable of, and I'm not going to let you pretend otherwise. So here is the first kindness strategy of the episode. I want you to do what I'm going to call a belief check. Here's how this works. Think about the 3 to 5 people in your life who matter the most to you: your kids, your partner, your closest friends, the people on your team at work. For each person, I want you to ask yourself this question honestly. Am I holding expectations that reflect what I actually believe they're capable of? Or have I dialed those expectations down to avoid discomfort, mine or theirs? This is not about manufacturing artificial pressure, but getting honest with yourself about where you have, without realizing it, communicated doubt in the form of a lowered bar. Write down what you find, because you cannot raise what you haven't first identified as too low. And here's the harder follow-up question. Who in your life is capable of more than you're currently expecting of them? Sit with that one. The answer to that question is where this episode is going to be the most useful for you. Okay, so we've established that low expectations aren't kind, but I can already hear the pushback, and I want to address it directly. Shola, I get it, man, I do, but I've been on the receiving end of someone's high expectations, and I can promise you that it felt nothing like kindness. It felt like pressure, like I was never good enough, like no matter what I did, the bar just kept moving. That didn't build me up, it damn near destroyed me. Okay, family, if that is your experience, I believe you. Want to be clear. And I also want to be very clear about this. What you're describing is not high expectations. What you're describing is perfectionism. And perfectionism, despite its ambitions, is the enemy of genuine growth, not its champion. Here's the critical distinction. High expectations rooted in love and belief say, I know what you're capable of, and I believe in you to hold you to that standard. Perfectionism rooted in fear and control says, nothing you'll ever do will be good enough, and my approval is always just out of reach. So as you can tell, one of those is a gift, the other is a wound, and they can look deceptively similar from the outside, which is why I want to dive a little deeper into this. The difference comes down to 3 things: belief, support, and grace. Let's break this down. So first of all, let me tell you about a coach who changed my understanding of all 3 of those things. His name was Coach Brooks. God rest his soul. And he was my high school basketball coach, man. He was one of the few people in my young life outside of my family who challenged me and pushed me out of my comfort zone consistently. He expected things of our team that seemed, at the time in my underdeveloped teenage brain, completely unreasonable, even though they actually were reasonable. He expected punctuality that felt excessive. He expected full effort on every single play, even when we were tired, frustrated, or when we felt like we had nothing left to give. And I'm going to be real with you. There were days where I just couldn't deal with it. One day at practice, he challenged me to only dribble with my left hand since I'm right handed, and I was terrible at dribbling with my offhand. I was so frustrated with this man. There were days I went home and complained about him at dinner. There were days where his expectations felt less like a gift and more like a prison sentence. But here's what I also remember about Coach Brooks. This man sincerely cared about everyone on the team, from the starting five to the last guy on the bench. He knew which one of us responded to being pushed harder and which one of us responded to being pulled aside for a gentle, quiet conversation. And this man showed up every single time, not just to demand our best, but to help us to figure out how to give it. As mentioned, he was one of the first people outside of my family who truly challenged me to show up as my best, and he will always be my guy because of it. That's the difference. High expectations without support is just pressure. High expectations without belief is criticism. High expectation without grace is perfectionism with a more flattering name. But high expectations combined with genuine belief, real support, and the grace to be human in the process, that's something different entirely. And that's what changes people. I want to give you a practical framework for how to hold high expectations in a way that actually honors the person you're holding them for. I call it the belief, challenge, support formula. And here's how it works. First, lead with belief. Before you issue any challenge, any standard, any expectation, you need to first communicate clearly and specifically why you believe the person is capable of meeting it. Not a generic pep talk, something real and specific. For example, I've watched how you handled this situation last quarter, and I know you have what it takes to do this. Or, I'm asking this of you because I've seen what you're capable of when you're fully invested, and I believe that you can get there. This part is not a formality, to be clear. This is the foundation, because high expectations delivered without communicated belief just lands as judgment. They land as, you're not there yet, without the crucial second half of that sentence. But I know you can get there, and I'm going to stay on you and stay with you until you do. Second, name the challenge clearly. Don't be vague about what you expect. Vague expectations are not high expectations. They're anxiety-producing confusion dressed up as standards. Be specific. For example, I need this report to be polished enough to go directly to the executive team. Or, I'm expecting you to lead this meeting without leaning on me for backup. Or if you're a parent talking to your kid, you could say, I know this assignment is hard. I also know that you haven't given your full effort yet. Clarity is an act of respect. When you're specific about what you expect, you're treating the other person as someone capable of understanding and rising to a clear standard. Vagueness, by contrast, is often a form of hedging, a way of holding a standard while leaving yourself a comfortable escape route from ever having to enforce it. And that is weak sauce energy. And third, offer real support. This is the piece that separates high expectations from unreasonable demands. What resources, guidance, or coaching or presence are you willing to provide to help this person meet the standard that you're setting? Because if you're setting a high bar and then walking away, you haven't given someone an expectation, you've given them an ultimatum. And ultimatums are not kindness. Coach Brooks didn't demand full effort and then disappear. My guy ran drills with us. He stayed late. He showed us how. He was in it alongside us, not above it, looking down on us. The same applies for leaders, parents, coaches, mentors, friends. If you believe someone is capable of more, your belief is not fully expressed until you are willing to be part of the process of helping them get there. So here is the second kindest strategy of the episode. Choose one person in your life where you believe is capable of more of what they're currently giving or showing. And this week, have what I call a belief conversation with them. Use the belief, challenge, support formula that I just mentioned. Lead with something specific that you observed that tells you that they're capable of more. Name that expectation clearly and without apology. And then, crucially, ask them what support would help them to get there. Don't assume you know. Ask. That last move is important because part of how you hold high expectations with love is by involving the person and figuring out how to meet them rather than simply issuing a decree from on high and waiting for results. This kind of conversation is uncomfortable. It requires courage. It requires you to be willing to believe in someone out loud, which makes you vulnerable to disappointment. But I promise you, family, the people in your life who most change you are the ones who are willing to take that risk for you because they believed in you. Now it's your turn to be that person for someone else. Hey, fellow kindness extremists, it's me, Shola. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, if you're mowing what I'm growing, if you're smelling what I'm stepping in. Okay, I'll stop. If you're enjoying what you're listening to so far, I would love it if you would take a moment to hit the subscribe button and leave a rating and a review. Those incredibly kind acts go so far in helping me to reach as many people as possible who will join the movement to actively create a kinder world. I appreciate you so much, my friend. Okay, let's get back to the episode. All right, my friend, we've talked about the low expectations we hold for others and how to replace them with something that actually honors the people in our lives. Now I need to turn the conversation back on us because the most important expectations you hold are the ones that you hold for yourself. And here's where I think a lot of people get genuinely confused, especially people who are drawn to the kindness work that we do on this podcast. There's a concept that has done enormous amount of good in the world over the last decade or so: self-compassion. Self-compassion, the idea that we don't have to be brutal with ourselves in order to grow. That harsh inner critic that many of us carry around, and that I dedicate an entire episode dissecting in episode 28 of my podcast, is actually counterproductive. And treating ourselves with the same warmth that we extend to a good friend is not only psychologically healthy, it actually leads to better outcomes. I believe all of that. And I think self-compassion is critically important and profoundly underappreciated. But here's where I think the message sometimes gets distorted in our culture. Self-compassion doesn't mean lowering your expectations for yourself. It does not mean making peace with less than what you're capable of. It does not mean excusing yourself from the hard work of growth in the name of being gentle with yourself. In fact, I'd argue that lowering your expectations for yourself is not self-compassion at all. It's self-abandonment. It's deciding at some deep level that you are not worth believing in. And that, my friend, is not kindness to yourself. It is the same cruelty that we we're talking about in part one, just turned inward this time. So let me share something that I think a lot of this comes down to. I know a lot of people, and honestly, I've been that person at different points in my life, who have a vision of what they want to do, what they want to create, and what they want to become, and they never go after it. Not because they lack ability, not because the opportunity isn't there, but because at some point they made an unconscious deal with themselves. If I don't try, I can't fail. If I don't hold myself to the high standard I actually believe in, I don't have to risk discovering that I can't meet it. Sure, I get it. That deal feels safe, but it is, without question, the most expensive deal you'll ever make, because what you trade away is not the thing that you wanted, it's the version of yourself that you could have become in the pursuit of it. Now, here's a nuance that I think is absolutely essential here. How you respond when you fail, when you fall short of your expectations, matters enormously. If your inner voice when you miss the mark sounds like a prosecuting attorney rather than a coach, if it lays into you with shame, catastrophizing, and global condemnations of your worth, then that inner voice is not holding you to a high standard, it's just harming you. The goal is to hold the standard while extending grace in the process. These are not opposites. They belong together. High expectations for your life plus genuine compassion for yourself when you struggle equal the exact formula that produces sustainable, meaningful growth. Personally speaking, years ago, when I was first building my speaking business, I had an internal standard for the quality of my work that I wanted to put out in the world that was really, really high. But when I fell short of that standard, when a talk didn't land the way that I'd hoped, when I didn't get the feedback that I wanted, when I missed the mark, I didn't respond with grace. I responded with a level of self-criticism that, looking back on it now, was genuinely brutal and cruel. I would replay the moment over and over and over again. I would catastrophize about what it meant for my future. I would question whether I was in the right field entirely. And what's wild is that I thought that self-criticism was the thing that was keeping me honest. I thought it was the thing that was going to make me better. But what it was actually doing was making me really, really afraid. It was making me risk averse. It was slowly training me to play smaller so I'd have less to criticize myself for. The breakthrough came when I started to separate the standard from the shame. I could still believe that I was capable of world-class work. That was the standard, and I was not willing to lower it. But when I fell short, I started practicing responding to myself the way Coach Brooks responded to us when we had a bad practice, with specificity, with a path forward, with a baseline assumption that this was not who I was permanently, but where I was temporarily. For example, I say to myself, okay, that didn't work. Here's what I'm going to do differently. And I'm still in this. That shift changed everything, because when you can hold a high standard without weaponizing against yourself, you actually become more willing to try new stuff, more willing to stretch, more willing to do the thing you've been putting off, because the fear of falling short no longer feels like a death sentence. So with that, here's the third kind of strategy of the episode. I want you to write what I call a standard plus grace statement for yourself. And yes, I actually want you to write it down. You know how much I love writing down stuff in this podcast, because it works better on paper than in your head. Here's how this works. The statement has two parts. The first part is your standard, a clear, honest declaration of what you genuinely believe you're capable of in one specific area of your life. Not what's easy, not what's comfortable, what you actually believe in your best moments when the fear gets quiet. Write that down. The second part is your grace commitment, a clear statement of how you'll treat yourself when you fall short of that standard. Not with excuses, not with lowered expectations, but with the kind of response that a truly great coach or mentor would give you. Specific, forward-facing, and rooted in the unshakable belief that falling short right now does not define your ultimate capacity. Something like, my standards are to show up fully in my most important relationships without hiding behind distraction or busyness. My grace is this: when I fall short of that, I will acknowledge it honestly, understand what got in the way, recommit to the standard, and not spend more than 24 hours in self-punishment mode before I get back to work. Family, that is not lowering the bar that you just heard. That's building the resilience to keep climbing toward it. Here's the truth that I want to leave you with from this part of the episode. The kindest thing that you can do for the people who depend on you, your kids, your team, your community, your significant other, the people who are watching to see what's possible, is to hold yourself in the highest standard that you are capable of. Not because it makes you better than anyone else, because your willingness to believe in your own potential and to keep reaching for it gives people around you the permission to do the same. You cannot inspire people to reach for more while you're making peace with less. Your commitment to your own growth is not selfish. It is, in fact, one of the most generous things that you can offer. Okay, fam, we've covered a lot in this episode. Today, we made the case that high expectations, when rooted in genuine belief, delivered with real support and practiced with grace, are one of the most profound acts of kindness available to us. Let me recap the 3 strategies we covered. First, we did a belief check to identify where we've communicated doubt in the form of a lowered bar, because the pull of low expectations is real and it does real damage, especially even when it wears the costume of kindness and compassion. Second, we've learned the belief, challenge, support formula for holding high expectations without crushing people. Lead with the belief, name the challenge clearly, and offer real support. And then have a belief conversation with someone in your life this week, someone you believe is capable of more, and say that out loud to them. And third, we turned this inward and wrote our own standard plus grace statement, because the most important expectations you hold are the ones you hold for yourself. And the goal is not to choose between high expectations and self-compassion. The goal is to hold both simultaneously without apology. I want to close by coming back to the question that I opened with at the beginning of this episode. Who is the person in your life who pushed you the hardest? Remember, that person took a risk when they held you to a standard you were sure that you could meet. They made themselves vulnerable to your resentment, to your resistance, to your frustration, because they believed that you were worth it. You're surrounded by people right now who are worth that same risk. And somewhere in your life, there's a version of yourself that is worth that risk too. Don't let the fear of being demanding talk you out of believing in people. Don't let the discomfort of high standards talk you out of having high standards. And don't let the seductive comfort of lowered expectations masquerade as kindness in your life for one day longer. The world does not need more people who are willing to let each other off the hook. The world needs more people who are willing to believe in each other, loudly, specifically, stubbornly, even when the person being believed in hasn't started to believe in themselves yet. That, my friend, is kindness. That is strength. And that is what this podcast exists to build. This is your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. And you now know that kindness can't be weak because you just experienced the strength of the Kindest Extremist podcast. Until next time, my friend, the journey to a kinder world continues. Thank you for listening to the Kindest Extremist podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. And I have one favor to ask. If you could kindly hit the subscribe button, leave a rating and a review, not only would that be incredibly kind, but by doing so, you're actively playing a role in growing this movement and ideally getting us one step closer to creating a kinder world. I hope to see you next week for another episode of the Kindest Extremist podcast. Bye for now.